Hello and welcome back to the podcast. We have a guy here that I'm really excited to talk about, Steve Lister. Now, if you're not following Steve on LinkedIn, his link is going to be just in the bottom in the comments here. Give him a follow. He has a great way of explaining retail sustainability in a tangible way that really people can understand and how to apply it in their business. I met Steve at a retail convention, and what really stuck out from meeting Steve is that he looks at sustainability from a grassroots level, and it's from a retailer's perspective. And I used to be a store manager for many years. The things he was talking about I could so relate to, and it's we can make changes. It doesn't have to be the big massive ones, it can be incremental ones that really have as big of an impact over time. Steve, and we know you're a sustainability consultant to global brands and retailers. You're on the Rethink retailer list as being a global influencer. Tell people a little bit about yourself before we delve into the conversation today.
Brilliant. Well, thanks, Louise. Thanks for inviting me on today. Yeah, it is a fascinating topic. Hey, look, and look, please, if you want to follow me, follow me. I try and make sustainability real and ground it in reality. I don't talk about 1.5 degrees and decreases and CO2 in the atmosphere. I ground it in sort of like where my passion is, and that is with global brands and retailers. And yeah, and we met a week ago at the show, and it was fascinating to hear your perspective and your background, and that's why I was really pleased for you to invite me onto the podcast. Well, my background really has been in sustainability for about 20 years. I started off in a big paper company as their international sales director and business development director. And for me, Louise, I was always fascinated in I was always fascinated in sort of like the materials, where they came from, the trees, those sorts of things. And hello, I'm not a tree hugger. I'm not a Greta Thunberg, right? But what I am is very passionate about it. And over those 20 years, I've really taken a lot of time to sort of like understand what are the impacts on the ground level, with people in those brands and retailers. And I've been really lucky to have traveled the world, working with brands and retailers as far away as Shanghai in China, down in Australia, New Zealand, all the way through sort of like Europe and over to the Americas. So yeah, and also very proud also to say, I'm the head of global sustainability for Popeye, the Point of Purchase Association, of which I've been working with for many, many years. I do that as a voluntary role, with them. And I'm also a judge for the Popeye Awards, the Shop Awards. So I see a lot of stuff, a lot of trends, a lot of new stuff that's coming out of the Far East, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Europe, and the Americas. And I'm more passionate now, actually, Louise, than I was even 20 years ago. Reason why 20 years ago, a lot of people didn't even want to talk to me about sustainability. I was this fringe guy talking about sustainability. But now the last 5 years has been exciting. Post-COVID, just everyone wants to talk about it, and that's what's exciting now. It's relevant. People want to talk about it, and there's no action being taken, which is really really positive for me. And I'm doing some great work with some great clients, and it feels good. It's good.
Yeah, so I'm going to delve into a couple of questions I had around that retail sustainability piece and areas that I know from speaking to retailers that I know they'd be interested to know as well, Steve. So, in your expert opinion, and you have that understanding from working with all these different brands, what are the trends are you seeing at the moment within that sustainability retail space?
Well, Louise, that's quite a sort of when I say difficult question, I'll try and
Yeah,
unpack what I
yeah,
mean by that is because there's trends coming from different areas. There's trends coming
mhm,
from consumers. There's
yeah,
trends then coming from the retailers
yeah,
and the brands who are reacting to those consumers.
mm,
And then you've got supply chain partners as well,
mm,
who are the manufacturing partners putting that back into those physical store spaces.
yeah,
Um, but for me, sort of like I look at it and think to myself, if you start off with consumers, and we're all consumers, you're a consumer,
yeah,
I'm a consumer, anyone who's on listening to the podcast is a consumer. And some of the trends we're seeing at the moment coming through is transparency is a big thing. So consumers want to know what they're buying. They want to see some eco labels, some sustainability in environmental labels that sort of like prove the point. But what they don't want is greenwashing. And if people podcasts haven't heard of that term before, it basically means, people making misleading statements and things like that. So they want to know what they're buying. They want to know where it comes from, and consumers then don't want to be greenwashed or sort of like hoodwinked into sort of like what they're buying. And then the final piece there with consumers is hey, look, it's the new normal, Louise. We can go into any store. We can go to H&M and buy a conscious range of fashion. You can go into Boots and you can buy sustainable toothbrushes and you name it, and cosmetics and stuff like that, all the way through to electric cars and whatever. So consumers ultimately will drive the response from the retailers, and that's another area where we're seeing with the retailers is, with that. So we can unpack that later on in the podcast, but really it all drives from the consumers. If the consumers want it, the retailers and the brands will then find it and deliver it back.
Yeah, so it's really listening. Yeah. So it's really listening to what's going on then with that shopper coming in the door and understanding maybe the profile of your customer coming in, and maybe the local area that you're in as well, Steve, would factor into that, where your store is actually situated. Is it a city? Is it a,
You're right. And it's also, hey, look, one thing I want to make very, very clear to people listening is, look, I understand that there are a lot of people who don't actually care around sustainability. I get it, right? If you're living, with not a lot of money, and you're struggling to make ends meet, are you going to buy something sustainable that's 2-3 times the price? No, you're not. So I get it. I get that, and I'm sympathetic because at the end of the day, you've got to look at where you are. And if you're in Chipping Norton and everyone's rich and they've got a lot of money, you can charge higher prices for things as well. But I think sustainability will touch everybody. It touches everybody. It touches everyone when it comes to heating and lighting. It touches everybody about the things we buy every day and the costs. So, indirectly, we're all sort of like aligned to sustainability. It's just I do believe that some people don't care. And hey, I'm going to say this as a little, I go to a lot of meetings with brands and retailers, and there's a lot of people that sit in those meetings who also don't care, But part of our role, and Louise, you're doing a great job here with the podcast, is it's our role to educate, and it's our role to educate and inspire and to bring people along that sustainability journey and to prove to them it does matter. And even the smallest things can make a big difference.
Exactly.
I hope that doesn't sound too cheesy, but
no, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. And I think what you're touching on there, I think, which is really relevant, is that it's about making, if someone is in the retail sector, be it buying, be it marketing, be it branch merchandiser, be it store manager, area manager, ops manager, whatever their role is, it's about making it relevant to them in their everyday job. Okay. When we come at them with the sustainability and, the development goals and all of this, it can feel very intangible. And it's the language that's attached to it as well, Steve. Yeah. For some people, that language, it's not clear in what the action is coming out of it. And going back to what you said earlier, and I don't know if we pressed the record button, was around, we're talking about emissions, we're talking about this. For people that are at a store level, okay, that could be the part-timer working on a Saturday. How is that actually relevant? Why are we having those conversations when they actually, in their role, coming in, stocking the shelves, actually cannot do anything about that? So I think sometimes when we look at it from an operational perspective, it's again breaking it down. So if I take an example like Next, they decided many years ago, they ran an incentive in their stores whereby they asked their frontline teams, did they have any ideas around cost saving measures, which were really around sustainability? And at the time, if you remember many years ago, if we go back to 2009, 2010, we were calling sustainability initiatives cost-saving initiatives. And I remember I used to walk in the door of Next in the bathrooms or the locker areas, and they used to have a picture on the wall saying, please turn off our lights to save our costs. It was actually sustainable, but we've changed the language around that. And I don't know if you remember that, Steve.
Yeah, and it was all around Plan A. And with all due respect, M&S really led the way with retailers with Plan A. It was the first real visible sustainability strategy that was led by by a major retailer. But you're right. You're absolutely right. So just to go back on a couple of things you said there, Louise, because they're really insightful. Is right. High level stuff I get, right. But you can't force too much high level stuff down to the average store staff member that comes in who's let's be really honest. They could be on minimum wage. Could be a Saturday person, girl or guy who comes in. What does it matter to them? Well, it matters to them because they will probably see a lot of things like waste.
Exactly.
So for them, if there's loads of displays, if there's loads of boxes, if they're having to take loads off the shop floor, if there's loads in the POS store at the back, they see visibly every single day how their operation works. And to be honest with you, store staff on the actual in the stores, that's where a lot of the answers are, to be honest with you, Louise.
Yes.
But a lot of the answer to the problems that we have are on the shop floor because they know it, they see it, they feel it, they're there every single day. So everyone has a responsibility all the way up that supply chain, all the way up those stakeholders. And you mentioned loads of them, from people on the shop floor to shop managers to area managers to shopper marketing teams to design teams. They all have a responsibility because, if you design something wrong right up at shopper marketing level and design level, that's going to flow all the way through to store. And then let's say, for instance, it's the wrong size, it doesn't fit the area, it's hard to merchandise, that you send too many of them, to store, all of a sudden that impact dominoes all the way through to that store staff member who's having to pick up stuff and throw it in the bin, and they go, well, a second, we haven't even got it out of the box. And then that people aren't stupid, Louise. People know that if they're throwing stuff away that hasn't either been used or unpacked or unboxed, or there's too much of it, people know that that's money and people know that that's wasteful. And at the end of the day, that's the profitability of the company, So for me, I look at it and think sustainability and profitability are not dirty words. They're not they're not separate. Having a sustainable, profitable company is the ultimate thing you can be.
Yes,
So
100%.
So why not head towards a sustainable business that's profitable? Because then you look after your stakeholders, you look after your staff, you look after the well-being of all of your supply chain partners, and your customers. So for me, they're mutually beneficial.
Yeah, and I think that sometimes go back to what you said, the profitability and sustainability. Sometimes I think what happens is we listen to the high level stuff, and some people come to me and they say, well, Louise, I don't really have the big budgets to do all of these, digital screens across all my sites, or it could be something, right? Anything. But I think it's okay. Well, what could we do with your business model that could actually reduce costs? So that could be your consumable orders. So if I look at one brand, a franchise brand, a French brand, and what they done was they brought in recycling. Now this is really basic, and a lot of retailers doing this at the moment. Recycling hangers and recycling staff purchase bags. So if a customer comes back with a refund, and if a staff member is purchasing something, that they use that used bag. So we're recycling it. We're not. We used to get refunds in, and we used to get the bag that the customers come back to refund or do an exchange with, and that bag, they put it in the bin and they would give out a brand new bag. And as a store manager, you would go, did you ask the customer the question, are they okay to use the bag they come in here with? And they said, but no, Louise, I just put it in the bin and I gave them a brand new one. So we've actually incurred an additional cost for a bag that might have cost 2p or 5p per bag. And it's really an educational piece. And that's a really easy, small one to talk about. And even we done posters at the back of the warehouse of that particular site. And we actually put the cost of each bag underneath it. So the extra small, medium, and large. And it was briefed on a team talk with the teams every morning. And there was conversations had around this. And that again taps into the behaviors, Steve, which I think is really important when we look at any initiative like that.
You're right, but let's look at the reason. The reason why that happened is because we were all in an area where overconsumption was never an issue.
Yeah.
So it didn't matter if you went to Tesco's and you pulled out 10 plastic carrier bags to take home your items. It didn't matter, But all of a sudden you get something like the David Attenborough Blue Planet, and you show a turtle with a carrier bag wrapped around its neck. All of a sudden it becomes highly visual. You get Greta Thunberg doing some of the work that she's been doing. And once you visualize it, the overconsumption, if you show, somewhere in Turkey, or somewhere in the world, which has got thousands and thousands of tons of fast fashion clothes being buried in landfill because we can't recycle it, then it becomes visual to someone, and then consumers will look at it, and then they will turn around and go, well, hold a second, I don't agree with this. So that's how trends happen. That's how things can change. Carry bags is a big one too. We've seen a massive, decrease. But one thing I'll throw back to you, Louise, is we'll stop using single-use carry bags. But how many bags for life have you got?
Yeah.
So the thing is,
yeah.
People turn around and say, "Oh, I've got 10 of those. I've got 15 tote bags made from cotton." And all of a sudden you create one problem from another problem. But the good thing is we're having those conversations. We're educating people, and we're already seeing some fantastic results being made in loads of different retailers and brands. Really, I think the age of consumption's over. I think the age of stuffing stores full of products that people either don't want or on displays and changing displays month after month after month, I think it's over. I think we've reached peak display and peak cardboard inside stores.
Yeah, and I think one of the areas I want to bring up, and I know we've divulged a little bit into it already, is, you know, it can get lost sometimes and I think it's a little bit of a blame game in the supply chain. And when we look at sustainability with the retail sector, and again, we're looking at it from that maybe that high level, and we're having, there could be a warehouse in the UK and it could be an Irish store, and we're blaming that supply chain issue, or we could have supply chain somewhere else in Europe, or it could be in the US, and again, it's a them problem, not an us problem. How do we do it when we're a bigger global brand? And I think something that I think is important, and we did touch on this earlier, and I think it's a really relevant one for every single company I've ever been in, and it's still a problem, is the in-store POS, and you'll have the data to back this up, and the window signage. And it seems to be one where our mindset hasn't really changed a lot around that, Steve. We get it in the POS, the additional POS, and we're chucking it in the bin, and we're not really thinking around how can we, something as easy as printing on both sides, and then turning it around, something like that. If it's the case that we're still in the paper, we don't have digital, ones in the store, is there something like that you can change? So we're not having to send another poster that's sending in the post, creating more image. It's a knock-on effect. So where do you feel, I suppose, knowing that problem exists there, have you, I suppose, heard any stories of maybe, and you don't have to name the brand, Steve, but I suppose retailers that have come up with really savvy solutions in order to tackle issues like that, I suppose, that are happening?
Yeah, I just want to, just before I will answer that question,
Yeah.
but I want to just go back just slightly and just also just answer one of the things you said about supply chains and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Is in the past, Louise, we didn't really care where everything was made. I get some cheap stuff from China and we'll ship it across, and I'll make it in different countries and we'll ship it across. But those sort of like things have started to change. Why? Well, shipping costs have gone up. Container prices are all over the place. People are charging more and more and more. We've got macro sort of like political issues in sort of like shipping areas. Coming through the different canals. So all of a sudden, shipping stuff around the world was really easy and cheap in the past. Well, shipping stuff in the world now isn't now easy, and it's not cheap. So all of a sudden we're seeing people going from far shore to near shore and even onshore. And just to sort of like to explain to people in the podcast, I'm not saying you're stupid, guys, but far shore, oh yeah, I get it from China. Near shore, yeah, we'll do it in Europe. Onshore, well, I'll make it in England. We can do it. And when you start to look at those things, that then has an impact to what you've just said. And let me just explain that. What I mean by that is I'm going to place an order and I want sort of like 1,000, I want 1,000 FSDUs, freestanding display units, to go into my stores. Okay. Well, first of all, nice stat for you, for everyone to remember on the podcast, 80% of the environmental or sustainable impact is determined at the early design stage, 80%. So if you're designing it wrong at the beginning, you'll never recover it, Louise. You'll never. It'll always probably end up in landfill, or it'll be a problem. So that's the first thing: is design, 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 design. That's where it's big, right? When you then come to the next point, is in the past we've just done like, oh yeah, I want 1,000 displays. Well, how do you know you need 1,000 displays? Oh, because that's what we ordered last year. Okay, so how many of those 1,000 displays last year did you use? I don't know. Well, where are they all sitting? Well, we sent them all out. Oh, did you? You did. Sorry. By the way, we also ordered 10% overs as well. So you didn't order 1,000. You ordered 1,100, and the 100 still stayed at the printers. So what happened to them? I don't know. They were probably binned or recycled. Okay, so you don't even know that either. So that's the thing is the thing is, Louise, when you look at that, that hasn't really changed.
Yeah.
So people aren't going out to store profiling, really. I'm sorry, they don't still do that.
Yeah.
They still don't speak to the reps to know exactly how many they need, or the stores. And then another thing is we compliance, big C word here, Louise. Compliance, right?
I do a lot of SOPs, so compliance for me is it's that benchmarking, that banding. Yeah, no, I love it. I love
Hey,
audits. Yeah.
so if I then send those 1,000 displays out to those stores, most people have no idea how many are either put out or put out in the wrong place or not even put out. And at Popeye, the Point of Purchase Association, who I work with, we've just done a compliance report. If you want to see it, just go on to popeye.co.uk and go through to sustainability or go to reports and have a look at it. I think there's a summary on there. Compliance hasn't changed for 20 years, Louise, right? We still don't know what goes in and out of store. And the store managers still have ultimate power when it comes to what's put out and what isn't. So when you think of that, just think of this for a second. You've produced 1,000 displays, could be wood, could be metal, no, probably not metal, but it could be cardboard or temporary displays. You've done all of that effort, it's not even put out. So it's going to go straight in the bin. Now, at what point has someone even worked out what's the loss of sales is that? So because you haven't got an FSDU out, you're not getting all the products on it. If you're not getting all the products, you're not getting all the profit. So it hasn't changed. And that, I think that's the industry's biggest dirty secret, I think, is compliance. If a retailer turned around to a brand and went, well, we only put out 70% of your displays, the brands would have something to say about it because they're paying for them. So for me, it's the most uncomfortable truth in the retail industry is compliance levels of display.
Yeah. And I think that that's something, and I'll be honest, I've seen it at a store level. I've seen it. I've probably been in those dirty compliance conversations in the past. Let's be honest. You know, and it's so true, Steve. And I remember sitting at a table and talking to retail directors and them going, well, what's the solution, Louise? What's the fix? And,
Well, then,
a lot of the time, Steve, a lot of the time, and I don't know if you've noticed this, a lot of the time in retail, a lot of those departments work in silos, and I see that from an operational. So you've the marketing up here telling you, then you've the operational here telling you, then you've the buying, and the buyers and the marketing don't always talk to one another, and that's the big problem. Okay, so we were like, okay, well, how do we actually come up with a solution? So communication is a big one. It's also about having, it could be if you have different regions, break up those regions, have champions. It could be a particular store that's really into sustainability, have them champion that as a region with a collection of stores whereby they're championing and they're looking after that in itself. And having even a review after you do those promotions. How did it go? Maybe we do a self-assessment audit, and even having the conversations after the promotions. I find there's a big hype up into it, but nobody actually sits down and really analyzes, guys, how well do the promos go? Okay, one of the stores in London sent through their pictures. They had a really savvy launch. this is what was our wins from that. We're not really bringing it back to the tangible. And what is the result we want?
Yep.
Are we analyzing it afterwards as a business? And who are we getting to champion it? So is there an accountability piece? So there's different parts to it, but there is solutions there, Steve, if people really put their thinking hats and done something about it.
There are, but if you turn, you make a great point there. But if you just turn it on its head, I'm not going to name the retailer, right? Spending around about 16 million a year on in-store marketing and displays. Okay, that's about. It's not a big boy. It's not one of the big ones, but it's not one of the small ones. 16 million quid, right? So I'm working with them, right? So let me just throw something at you then. So if I turn around to you and said, well, 10% of your displays or your marketing doesn't get actually activated in store, that's 1.6 million pounds worth of stuff. Okay, that's not even there. Some of the figures we've seen are more around about the 30%, right? So if I just take 30%, that's nearly 5 million. It's 4.8 million of your spend doesn't even go out into store. Now, if you're a shopper manager and you went to your CEO and said, the 16 million you gave me to spend on marketing, 4.8 million of it just went straight in the bin, you'd probably get fired, right? So you look at that, but that's the dirty secret. That's the thing, is where people are going, do you know what? I'll put a bit of smoke and mirrors to this, and do you know what? I can manipulate it. But at the end of the day, that's what it accounts to. It accounts to waste, and waste equals money, and the money then equals sort of like loss of profit. So you can connect all of these things together if you want to, right? But for me, I look at it and I would turn around and say, sustainability, you've got to have it embedded as one of your metrics. And if it's embedded in one of your KPIs or one of your metrics at the top, the shopper marketers, the marketing teams, then all of a sudden you start to ask those questions, Louise, which are like, why are we doing it? How many do we need? Show me the data first. How are we going to make it? And then that might then start to affect the decisions that you make to turn around and say, we don't need 1,000, we need 800. And in fact, we don't need 800, we only need 600. And then you might then see some of the trends that we're now seeing, Louise, which is temporary displays are now being replaced with semi-permanent temporary displays, which the carcass remains the same. And all you then do is you just update the side panels and the headers. Now, that also then tackles compliance, because once something goes in, the footprint is established. It's in there. You can see it. So your compliance levels goes up. Your consumption level goes down because you're not producing a cardboard FSDU every 4 weeks and replacing it on a 13-week cycle. And then honestly, once you start to look at that and you break out of the old thinking of, I must put a new display in every 4 weeks on a 13-month cycle, which most of these big retailers do, Louise, you've got to look at it and think they can make some big savings. But most importantly, it's not just about savings. It's about increase of product, visibility in store, which means you sell more product, which means everybody wins. It's actually as simple as that.
It is. And I think what you touched on there, and I would have came from an extremely KPI background for a number of years where, we'd footfall counters, conversion, ATV, IPC. I'm going to share something which just hits the nail on the head, which is exactly what you said there. If we're not measuring it, we're not managing it.
Yep.
And it's what you said there. It's a KPI. And I worked for a large global DIY retailer. And I remember I went into this retailer and I was in on one of their quarterly meetings, and they brought out what they call their KPI scorecard. Okay. And I remember sitting in the meeting and I was looking at all of these KPIs. There was one KPI that really stuck out to me that I'd never seen in any brand in my life. Okay. And I'm going to tell you what that was. There was a line in the KPI report that said slips, trips, and falls.
Oh, that sounds like accident, health and safety.
They actually had given the store managers a KPI whereby they were measuring any incidences, because it was a massive DIY store. And there was they had a forklift, it was huge, right? But they were actually saying to the managers, if you're not managing this KPI in the business, if we look at our accident reporting book, are people actually inputting stuff in it? Is there cobwebs on it? Do they even look at where the fire extinguishers are? Are we leaving the doors open with the fire extinguishers? Hands up, I've done it in the past as a store manager when I got a delivery in, and I know I shouldn't have, but many store managers did. But when I went into this particular business, Steve, it stuck out at me that the way they seen health and safety was a very different place to where the other stores would. Why? Because we've now said to them, for you to be successful in your role, you manage this in the right way. And you manage it in the right way because these are the deliverables. And if we look to what you just said there, which is really a solution to a lot of this, is if we had on our KPI report, and we're looking at that every week, every month, we're going into our next month, we're looking at it quarterly. And we said, where are you in your stores with your sustainability? And we really broke that down and we said, right, you have your FSDUs, you have your whatever, your stands. Are you actually, how many of them are you dumping? How many of them are you actually
waste management?
Waste management, exactly. How are you upcycling? What are you doing? Are you bringing them in, damaging them, and then requesting more because you're just not being careful taking your deliveries in? Are we actually really managing it, or are we pieing it off to being someone else's problem because we're not being proactive enough around it? And the only way you're going to manage that is by doing what you said there. Yeah.
And that's it, because the third part of that is if you can't sort of like manage it, you can't measure it. But if you can't measure it, you can't reduce it.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the thing. So for me, Louise, I look at it now and think, by the way, can I just say, if anyone's listening to this and they are a store manager, I take my hat off to you, by the way, right? Managing stores is a tough job to do, right? And all the pressures you have from everybody is a tough job. So I take my hat off to those people who are store managers. The one thing I will say is, and I've been in many stores, and I've been, lucky or unlucky to be gone through a lot of bins at the back of stores as well, Louise, because I've done a lot of work on waste and waste recycling, and it's the easy option is just to chuck stuff away. The easy option is just to say, well, it's not my job, it's not my role. They sent me 4, I just put 3 in the bin because I didn't need them. I just think we're entering a new era where maybe responsibility of our resources and the responsibility of our businesses will be taken a little bit more seriously. And like you said before, there's different generations. If you're a Gen Z, you're under 27, wherever you are, you've grown up with sustainability. So you'll see waste, you'll see things that are wrong. And most under 27-year-olds or under Gen Z don't want to work for unsustainable businesses. They want to work for sustainable businesses. There's loads of reports that show, that actually, that's the generational age, which, hey, if you're under 27 now, you're going to be the manager. You're going to be the next chief marketing officer. You're going to be the next chief executive of these businesses in the next years to come. And if you've grown up with it and it's been that thing, you're going to take all of those best practices through to you. Hey, look, there's a lot of people like me in their 50s, who are going to be retiring soon. I'm not, by the way, just want to make that very clear. There's a lot of people who are going to be retiring. And I actually think that's a good thing. I actually think that a lot of the old guard are going to move on, in the next few years as they go through, and then the next generation will come through. And I think that's when we'll see some real change.
Yeah, and I think that was, and I love the way you've touched on that, because that was one of my questions, Steve, was around the Gen Z. And I think it's important that from a lot of retailers that are struggling to recruit at the moment, are they highlighting the sustainability initiatives that they're doing in order to talent manage in the business and to get more buy-in and loyalty from an employee perspective, because they are looking for it. And as you said, it's there, the data says it. It's really important. I suppose bridge it out from that. If we look at, so we've looked at really the internal, the people, all of that. If we look at then, and I know we touched on it at the beginning, and it's a nice way to kind of round us back before, we finish up, is, do shoppers, in your opinion, and it's been a big talking point, Steve, I do a lot of customer service kind of training with retailers, but does it actually, in your opinion, make the shopper want to buy if the brand is not greenwashing, we're not saying they're greenwashing, we're not using it
Yeah.
as a marketing ploy, but does it make them it does it impact their buying decisions when they feel they're being more conscious and being more sustainable to the environment?
Well, this is a really good question. I don't think I'm going to answer it fully, and the reason
Yes, it's
for
okay.
that is,
Even your opinion, Steve. Yeah,
yeah. Well, okay,
yeah,
okay. Good. Okay, let's go for it then. Right.
yeah, yeah.
Hey, look. I think consumers ultimately, I do believe ultimately most people want to do the right thing. I do.
Hmm.
And I said at the beginning that some people don't care either. Now, let me just take fashion for instance. There's two sides of fashion. So you've got one side of fashion that someone wants to go and buy a 99 pence t-shirt and they want to wear it a few times and then throw it away. That's the bad side, right? But then you've got the good side is if you're under 27, if you're Gen Z, you don't think twice of using Vinted to sell your clothes. You don't think now that going to a charity shop is something to be sneered at anymore. It's actually a badge of honor. I see, my daughter does lots of things where she sells things on Vinted. She goes to shops where things are reused, and they're even changing the wording around charity shops now. That it's about
Oh, I
reuse
know.
and relive,
Yeah.
and a new life to clothes and things like that. So you've got those two areas as well. You then go into beauty, right? Again, sorry to go on about Gen Zs, but if you look at Gen Z, if you're a female under 27 and because I've just mentioned beauty, and I've been very lucky that I've been working with some fantastic
Mhm.
beauty brands. Oh, by the way, going down to Lush next week. I've been invited down to Lush to look at their recycling centre, and where they take in all of their old product packaging and they grind it and turn it into new products. Watch this space. Follow me on LinkedIn, and I'll show you more of that. But back to beauty. If you're an under 27-year-old female and you're using a beauty brand that either isn't ethical or sustainable, you'll get dropped like that. You know, people are more educated these days and they will cancel you very, very quickly. Different areas, Louise, whether it's fashion, whether it is beauty. Let me just touch on grocery because that's really, really difficult. Now, most people will say to you, I want to shop more sustainably. You can do opinion polls where you'll interview someone walking into a store. It could be inside a sports shop, it could be inside a fashion store, could be inside a beauty store. But, if you interview people, most people will say, yes, I'm going to shop sustainably. If you interviewed them on the way out, most people haven't shopped sustainably. And most people on their journey, when you ask them, what have you seen as messaging? Some of that messaging is very, very confusing, you know? So you've got to be a bit careful that you turn around and say, yeah, I'm going to do a massive sustainability campaign in store and I'm going to put all these messages.
Yeah,
Most people don't see them, Louise. They're
yeah,
on a mission. Groceries are very different. So let me make also the point here is if you're on a tight budget, and a lot of people are at the moment with the cost of living crisis, you know, you're going to feed your family and you're going to try and feed them the best you can. Are you going to be buying free range Oakham chicken fillets that are £12 a pack? No, you're not. So we've got to balance this whole thing. And just to make one quote here, and I don't normally quote people, but Sir David Attenborough said, saving our planet is now a communications challenge. And I think that's one of the best things he's ever said.
if I could
So
summarize this whole podcast, that would be it in one,
it
yeah,
is, and I think
it
that's a
is.
great way to end. Really,
Yeah,
is it's how we communicate it.
yeah,
We've got to communicate it in the right way to the right people where it resonates, because we all can make a difference, even if you are on tight budgets or if you can't afford, certain things. Is you can still make a difference by maybe not buying as much or buying things that are slightly different in your budget. All of those things will have an impact, and they'll have an impact sustainably moving forward for us.
yeah. I think that's brilliant. You've summarized it really, really well, Steve. And I think it is a communication piece. And I think that we have the penny has dropped through COVID, but I still think there's a lot of work to do there. And I think people like you that are out and championing that and communicating that with your case studies on LinkedIn and loads of other great content that you put out there, Steve, is a great way to show people different angles of it and different perspectives, which I think is really important around this, because it's not a one size fits all approach, which is what you alluded to. Yeah.
It's not. Follow me. Look at the content. If you've got any questions, come back to me. Send me a message. Always glad to help. One thing I will say is about sustainability is you've got to collaborate. You will not succeed on your own, and the only way we can succeed on sustainability is sort of like working together, collaborating. Because that's the only way we're really going to succeed on it. You won't be able to do it on your own.
Thank you so much, Steve. If people want to reach out to you, the best way to find you is on LinkedIn.
Yeah, go on LinkedIn or go onto my website, stevelister.com, and have no issue with anyone sending me an email if they've got a question. You can either go to asksteve.co.uk. There's a nice little website I've got there as well. Ask any question you want on sustainability, or if you really want a one-to-one, just send me an email at steve@stevelister.com.
Thanks a million, Steve. Thank you so much. And I will have those links just underneath in the chat.